All right, well, with that, we're going to get started. Welcome, everyone. I'm Christian Wagley. I'm Coastal Organizer for Healthy Gulf. This is a post-election climate roundup. Healthy Gulf is a nonprofit organization dedicated to the Gulf of Mexico and the waterways and communities along its shores. I'm based in Pensacola and work along the Florida Gulf Coast and a little bit of Alabama. Our organization is based in New Orleans, and we work in all 5 Gulf states. And like all pretty much, environmental and conservation organizations do, we work in partnership and we work in coalition with others to get as much done as we can and really engage on the ground in communities. And so we thought it would be great to come together now and just the days, less than a week it's been after the election, and bring some folks together to talk about where we are in terms of climate change after the election, a path going forward, what we think might happen, what some strategies might be. And then also, this is a chance for really a focus on Pensacola and the Pensacola-area, some of the groups that are working in this area, all of which you see on the screen before you, for them to share their work that they're doing and to share how everyone can get more involved in that work. One of the things about elections is, regardless of whether you are happy or disappointed, it always creates change, and change creates opportunity. And so there's certainly opportunity now to do some, hopefully some great things on climate, because it is the most important issue we're facing. It's certainly the epic challenge of our time, and we've got to get it right. So fortunately, it wasn't that long ago that there were very few people working on climate issues in Northwest Florida. Now we have more and more. So we're very, very fortunate to have that, and to have all of them, all the main ones that I can think of, here to join us tonight. So let me do a few introductions, and then we're going to get started with kind of the post-election assessment side of things before we then get into the part where each group can kind of share some of the work that they're doing. So first of all, I want to introduce Marley Wells. Marley is with the Sunrise Movement here in Pensacola. She's a native of Tennessee. Yep, she's got a biology degree from Maryville College in Tennessee. She's been in Pensacola for about 2 years now. So welcome, Marley. We're really glad that you're here with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian.
You bet. Sandra Adams is Executive Director of 350 Pensacola. 350 Pensacola is the group that's been working on climate change issues the longest in Northwest Florida, and about 10 years now. Actually, I think it's for sure started in 2010. Sandra's Executive Director. She's also a practicing clinical psychologist, and this is pretty interesting. She's a self-described recovering oil brat because she's the daughter of a petroleum engineer who worked on, of all things, the Alberta tar sands. So she's been doing her kind of reparations ever since then, and she's been doing great work for many, many years, all the way from the apartheid movement in the 1980s to climate change work today. So Sandra, thank you for being here.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And then next we have Jay Mcgee. Jay is with Environment Florida. He's a student at the University of West Florida, and he's heading their 100% renewable campus campaign out there. And it's just great to have Jay, because there's never really been really any big clean energy or climate efforts much out at the University of West Florida. So that's really exciting. A little bit more about Jay. He's from Cocoa Beach area down in South Florida. He's majoring in marine biology and a minor in environmental science. And in addition to being a student and an intern, he's also vice president of the Student Environmental Action Society called SEAS at UWF. So welcome, Jay.
Hey, thanks for having me.
You bet. And then joining us special tonight is Lindsay Cross. She's the Government Relations Director for Florida Conservation Voters. Hey, Lindsay.
Hey, Christian. Good to see you.
You bet. Always good to see you too. Lindsay's down in St. Petersburg, and she's joining us really to help us mainly with the conversation around action at the state legislative level. Lindsay worked extensively in Tallahassee during session and with state elected officials throughout the year as well, and really has the pulse of that, I think, better than any of us do. So we're really glad to have her joining us to talk about that. So let me make sure you all, I'm running the Zoom here as well. I think I've got everybody admitted, so I'm gonna set that out of the way for a second here. So let's get started with some discussion about kind of where we are after the election. And I know that, oh, my cursor's not advancing here. Hang on. Yeah, I know I'm screen sharing. There we go. Just a little slow, but as you all know, you've been following the news, and Saturday came really the official announcement that the election at the federal level has been called for for Biden and Harris. And we know, at a technical level, there's the Electoral College, and a number of the races still have to be certified by certainly by all accounts, Joe Biden is our next president. And so the results at the federal level, the state level, and the local level as well. We want to talk about some of that, but I think we'll start at the federal level. And I'm just going to put out a question there to everybody about what a Biden presidency means for climate action. What do you think President Biden can get done? Do you think he'll keep some of the promises he made during his campaign? And so I'll put that out there to any of the panelists who want to answer that.
Well, I'll take a shot at it. It's clear to me that Biden wants to do something, and I think there are a number of executive actions that he will take. One of the articles that I was reading today, Christian, that you shared with us was kind of depressing, and it was talking about how it could take years even just for him to undo a lot of the damaging effects that the Trump administration put into place, such as reducing the fuel energy standards and getting rid of the Clean Power Act, or gutting it basically. I think he will try and reinstate a lot of those things. And I think those are things he's going to have to focus on doing as the executive actions, because unless the Senate does go for the Democrats, which is, I guess it's a kind of on a pin's edge at this point, but assuming that it doesn't, he's going to be really hamstrung by the Senate not being in his corner, and in fact probably actively working against him. So I think that means that congressional action is going to be pretty limited, and we're going to have to probably count on a lot of his executive actions, unless we can convince enough Republicans and Republican Senate members to really get with the program and come on to the other side and to get involved in really addressing climate change in a serious manner.
Anybody else want to add in on that?
Yeah, I would have to agree with Sandra saying that it's going to take multiple administrations to undo what President Trump has done in terms of climate change, taking us out of the Paris Climate Agreement, executive acts on oil. But I do like what Biden and his campaign really stated, that we need to believe the science. And I think that's something that a lot of people will look up to, is that we need to believe the science. And also like some of the some stuff that the Joe Biden campaign talked about in terms of climate, the construction of 1.5 million sustainable homes and housing units by the end of his term, or his first term, methane pollution limits, net zero carbon emissions by 2050, carbon-free or carbon pollution-free electricity by 2035. I really think he has his head in the right spot, and I think his campaign will be the beginning of I would say a revolution in terms of focusing on the environment, really getting people who are knowledgeable about climate change, and people who can do something very well.
How about just rejoining the Paris Agreement alone, right? Because I think that's something he can certainly do by himself, right? There's he needs no other approval. And I know, I guess, one of the things about president is you have the proverbial bully pulpit. You have whenever you speak, everybody hears it, and you have the ability, certainly to show leadership, because everybody is following your every word and following your every move and what you do. So I believe he's pledged to do that, immediately upon taking office. But Lindsay, I think you had something to add.
Yeah, I think with us coming and trying to work through this COVID-19 pandemic, which is going to be continuing to be one of the most critical issues that we're facing, in addition to climate change, I think getting us back on the road to economic recovery really needs to be focused on investments in our green infrastructure, whether you call it a Green New Deal, whether you just have better coordination with the private sector. I think that we really need to be investing in the type of infrastructure, repairing infrastructure that's failing, things that are going to keep our communities safe, whether that's improving the quality of their drinking water, but whether it's making sure that we're not having sewage dumped into our waterways. Those are type of things that are going to put people back to work, that are going to improve the environment and the health of community members. And I think that needs to be a focus of this administration, as well as the things that we're doing on a state and local level. We need to be showing how shifting towards renewable energy in a just and equitable way, how that's good for the bottom line of our government sectors and the private sector as well. Our economy, if we just focus on the environmental kind of tree hugger side of it, we're not going to get the traction that we need. And I think that those of us on this panel understand that we can use investments in green technology and, building our communities the right way and doing things that are more sustainable, that promote more walkable, livable communities. Those are also going to help us with our climate crisis, and they're going to make it just a better environment for all people to live in.
That's great, Lindsay. And there is a lot of talk about how things like green technology and investments in that might be something that could be more bipartisan, because there's obviously, like, for example, there's the big issue of storage of electricity, whether that's more advanced batteries, probably mainly that, and there's some other things as well that can be used to store energy. But that's a big area that needs to be improved upon and needs the research and development and needs the incentives. And I know that's something they talked about could potentially be something, bipartisan. I also like that you talked about some of the justice issues, which more and more are coming to the fore. I know it's something very important for Healthy Gulf. We've signed on to the Gulf South for a Green New Deal. And I think really every conservation environmental organization now is really trying to move forward and advance the cause from the justice standpoint. And I was very impressed during one of the debates where now President-elect Biden actually talked about, if you remember, he talked about fence line communities. Do you remember that? There was I don't remember what the question was, something related to pollution, but he actually knew what a fence line community was, which is the people that live adjacent to the, polluting industries and suffer from that. And those are the folks that have been shown even to be suffering disproportionately in the age of COVID, because they already have a compromised respiratory system that's, vulnerable to COVID-19. So I was certainly impressed with that. So anything else on the presidential level? Otherwise, we can probably talk about Congress a little bit. We've talked about it a little bit, but anybody want to jump in there?
No.
No? Well,
look, going back to some of our investments, one positive thing that happened in the past few months is that we did have the Great American Outdoors Act, which was signed, which was some pretty landmark legislation committing funds permanently to the Land and Water Conservation Fund, which helps to create parks and preserve both on a national level and bringing money back to the states. So that is something that was reauthorized permanently last year, but it did not have the funding attached to it. So we actually saw that legislation passed earlier this year. That was a bipartisan effort. It also had money in there to kind of upgrade some of the infrastructure in our park systems. We know that the people are using our parks more than ever. It's a safe way for people to have interaction, to get outside and be in the fresh air and the environment. But many of our national parks, have been badly in need of repair. So those type of investments also are a way to put money back into our conservation lands and, help to bring jobs and stimulate the economy in that way. Many of our rural communities, whether it's at state parks or national parks, having a park there may be one of the biggest economic drivers with ecotourism and just bringing people to those areas to enjoy the natural beauty. So we can't forget that investing in conservation and the infrastructure to support it is also going to be good for our environment and for our economy.
Mm-hmm. I do want to say this about Congress, that I think that we have a real opportunity right now to really press even the Republicans in our state, especially Marco Rubio. I don't know where, what's the other guy's name? I'm blanking, the former governor. Rick Scott, yeah. I don't know if I think he's the one who took climate change out of the whole discussion, so he's probably not anybody that we can ally with in any way. But I think that Marco Rubio has shown some signs of being a little bit more open to addressing some of the climate change issues. And I think this is our opportunity now to really press our Republican colleagues and Congress people and say, hey, get on board. If you can't agree to our whole Green New Deal kind of thing, fine. What can you agree to? Where can we compromise? Where can we work on things? Citizens climate lobby, you know, with the trade and dividend program, that might be something that more Republicans can get on board. It's not ideal, but it might be a better than nothing solution, you know, in terms of trying to get some legislation passed. So I think there are some, I was kind of sanguine about it before, but I think there are some opportunities there. We just have to be smart about them, and we have to start really just talking about climate change all the time, which I'm glad to see the media is finally starting to pick up a little bit more of that, and get people seeing that this isn't really a political issue so much as it's a human and a planetary issue. You know, we just got to address it.
So I do want to move on to the state legislature now. Before we do, I do want to thank Phil Ayer for joining us this evening. Phil was a candidate, Democratic candidate for Congress here against Matt Gaetz. He did not prevail, but Phil, we appreciate you being on the call tonight and your attention to climate action, to environmental issues, all the things that you've been part of here in the community. So it means a lot to have you join us. So thank you. Just wanted to recognize you. The state of Florida, as far as the legislature goes, they really, I think, dipped their toes into climate change for the first time this last year, where they passed a piece of legislation that requires an impact study be done on any publicly financed projects. This could be like roads, bridges, you know, community centers, whatever, that are in coastal locations that are potentially vulnerable to sea level rise. It requires that before that money is spent, that they look at, I think it's 30 years, and Lindsay may be able to correct me, but it looks out some number of decades into the future to see if it's a wise investment or not, if it's going to go underwater, if it's going to have to be shored up, whatever. That's really their first foray into climate change at all. But Lindsay, do you want to talk about anything you might see happening this coming year based on, first of all, bring us up to speed on what happened in the elections here in Florida, State House and Senate, and then where we might go from here.
Yeah, so that bill that you're referencing, I don't have the number on the tip of my tongue right now, but that was a bipartisan bill supported by some legislators from South Florida. As we know, South Florida really is a place where we're seeing the impacts from climate change, in particular sea level rise, the most acutely and the most immediately, with sunny day flooding in Miami and other coastal areas. I'm sure you all in the Panhandle experience it at certain times, maybe high tides when we have those really high tides during the spring and the fall. And of course, you all are no strangers to impacts from storms and hurricanes. But the bill that Christian is referencing was one that was passed last year. On the House side, it was Representative Vance Alupis, who is a Republican. On the Senate side, it was Senator Jose Javier Rodriguez, who's a Democrat. That was one of the tightest races that we had this year, is between with Jose Javier Rodriguez, which is coming down to a vote count right now, but he's someone that we're in danger of losing. And he has been one of the strongest advocates for climate in our state. You may have seen pictures of him wearing knee-high rubber boots, his galoshes that wrote #ActOnClimate. So he has been beating that drum for several years up in Tallahassee because he knows that it is already affecting members of his community down in the Miami-Dade area, and it's going to continue to do that. So if the vote count does not go his way, we are really going to have to look for some other people that are going to pick up that mantle and use that legislation kind of as a starting point and make sure that we're going to be more aggressively pushing some climate action. We lost Julia Neschwitz, who was the resiliency officer at the state level. Of course, she went on to work with the Trump administration. So that position is vacant right now. So there's a lot of things that could happen, but there needs to be pressure on both the legislature and Governor DeSantis to fill some of those spots to get a new resiliency officer around there. There are communities that are really hungry to take action, and we've seen that things on a local and a regional level are progressing much faster than we're moving at a state level. So the Southeast Climate Compact, which is multiple governments and partners throughout the community, has been very proactive about looking at kind of disaster models and the cost of inaction. That's something that we really need to be focusing on. We think about how much it's going to cost to retrofit things or to move certain things out of the coastal high hazard area, but the cost to rebuild, we get to this point where it's more expensive to fail to act and to lose structures, to lose places where people are living and working, than it is to do these proactive solutions that's getting us, people out of harm's way and starting to shift us, not just from a reactionary resiliency standpoint, but really making, starting to turn down some of the temperature knob on this warming climate. So I think moving into more aggressive action on climate is where we have to be, and not just kind of dancing around these ideas of resiliency and doing things that make people feel good, but aren't really moving the needle and getting us away from our reliance on dirty fossil fuels.
But do you think the legislature is ready to go there yet? I know I had a meeting a few weeks ago with Representative Andrade, who was reelected from this area, and he did say to me that he could see them spending money on additional resiliency projects, stormwater controls, whatever, living shorelines, various things like that. But he didn't seem to indicate any support for, say, moving to the clean energy economy or anything that would be more substantive like that. Do you see that as well? Or?
I do. I think it is going to be a difficult couple years for us at a state level. We do have a Republican controlled legislature. We actually lost some seats in the House this year and the Senate. So it is going to be harder to push those type of things that have been seen as more progressive issues. But part of our messaging has to be that this is really this is protecting our ability as humans to inhabit this planet, and for our economy, these are necessary steps that we have to take. So part of it is how we message, and the things that we're putting into this legislation, making sure that there's an economic component to it, and that we're helping to support rebuilding jobs in local communities, and finding a way to always tie that back to these good proactive climate legislation.
So Lindsay, it's interesting, there's polling data showing that solar energy is by far the most popular form of energy with Floridians. And this is conservatives, liberals, everybody loves solar and they want more access to it, yet the legislature never seems to really be willing to either incentivize it or, there's also the laws that limit the ability of what they call third-party sales of electricity. They can't do the solar leasing model that they do in other states to protect the utilities. Do you think it's the power of the utilities in Tallahassee that really seems to hold things up in terms of, they want the inevitable transition to renewables to happen on their terms and not anybody else's? Or what can you say about that?
I think the utility industry is incredibly powerful in terms of a special interest. They will kind of give just like little nuggets of things that are, conducive with their business model. It's really difficult to get some of these more aggressive actions because it's seen as a threat to the power, the utilities and the power plants. We're seeing kind of a similar struggle right now with utility shutoffs for customers and for some of these utility providers looking at trying to get some federal funds to, as a kickback for some of this work, where really it's everyday Floridians who are suffering during this pandemic that are getting their water or their electricity shut off. So that's why Florida Conservation Voters has been involved with a whole cadre of organizations in an effort called Connected in Crisis to make sure that we're keeping the lights on for people, really because it comes down to a human health issue in some cases as well.
Wow. Well, let's just shift as we wrap this part of the conversation up to the local level here in Pensacola. I think anybody who's been involved in climate issues around here knows that the focus of our work, multiple groups working in this area, has really been with the city of Pensacola. which had a climate task force that that met and delivered their report a couple of years ago with recommendations for a path forward for the city of Pensacola. And so a number of the groups, here tonight have worked on that. They're going to touch on that a little bit. So as far as the election goes, what I'll tell you is the Pensacola City Council has 7 members, and 4 of them, we could potentially have 4 new ones. We're going to at least get 3 new ones. And I'll mention that one potential new member, likely new member, is Jennifer Breyer, who's joining us on the call this evening. So thank you, Jennifer. Jennifer's daughter, Mia, was originally going to join us tonight as well, but something came up. Mia has been involved with the local climate movement, with Sunrise Movement, and also Fridays for Future. But Jennifer, we're really glad to have you on the call. For those of you who don't know, Jennifer Breyer has run for City Council District 1, and she's currently up by 3 votes. And so every vote counts, right? And so we're waiting to see, we'll know for sure that that count will be certified on Friday. There's a possibility that a few overseas ballots will still come in, and by law, those are allowed to still come in if they were postmarked by the day of the election. So, so we will see. I know Jennifer's got her fingers crossed and watching for that, but we'll know on Friday. So I know we've got a supporter in Jennifer for climate action and good environmental policies as well. I'm not sure the other council members are new council members coming in, or Tenayade Broughton, Delarian Wiggins, and Casey Jones. I've heard some nice things about Delarian Wiggins. I have not met him. He's replacing Jewel Canada Wynn. I do not know Casey Jones. He's replacing Councilman Annie Tahar. And then Tenayade Broughton is really great. She's been involved in a lot of history, African-American history, especially in our community, and deep roots in the community. She's really a real go-getter, and smart, and just working on so many great things. And I believe that she would be supportive. I have not talked to her about these issues. One of the things is the Pensacola City Council so far has always supported the climate task force. They supported the work of the task force. I don't think we have any, climate deniers on the council, or haven't in recent years. But the next step now is implementing the recommendations that the task force made, and that really has not happened en masse yet. There's a couple things happening, and I can talk some about those when I do my presentation later. But anyway, I think it was a good election for the council. Pretty significantly, if Jennifer Breyer is elected, I believe it'll be the first majority female council that there's ever been for Pensacola. So that would be 4 women and 3 men. So that is truly a historic shift if Jennifer prevails. Like I said, we'll know Friday. But I think we generally have a friendly council. It's just a matter of engaging with all of you and engaging with our supporters and members in the months ahead to bring them back around to that climate task force report and getting them to take action. So that's something that I know I'm going to be focused on a lot, and I know the rest of you are as well. So with that, I think we're going to move the conversation into each of the groups represented here to just give an update on their work and how folks can get more involved. Before I do that, I do want to mention we're going to use the chat for questions. So the panelists and participants will be able to answer questions at the end. So if you have a question, please type it into the chat. And I'm going to ask just Jay and Marley to help me monitor that. It's a little, I've got like 3 or 4 different windows and things here. Gets a little confusing for me. So, but we'll do those questions at the end as opposed to after each individual speaker. And so with that, as I'd mentioned, Mia had hoped to join us, but was not able to. But Mia Breyer has been working with the Fridays for Future events, which is a Friday sit-in at Pensacola City Hall that started last winter, started by Jet Zhang. Jet's a young, he's a freshman in college now, freshman at Harvard, who was a Pensacola high school student who came to us maybe a year and a half or so ago, 2 years ago with 350, and got involved. And he started the Fridays for Future event here in Pensacola, along with Mia and some others. And it's been on hiatus now since COVID. So it's been on hiatus since early March. We just had our first one back again a few weeks ago, or a couple weeks ago, since COVID. But it's basically inspired by Greta Thunberg. Last year it was happening every Friday, but for now we're going to try to do it once a month. So we're going to schedule another one for later this month in November. And we may even shift, even though it's Fridays for Future, we may shift to some Thursdays, because Pensacola City Council meets on Thursdays at 5:30. So it would make sense to allow us to interact with a lot more people, to be out there as people are arriving for Pensacola City Council meetings, which have just gone back to in-person meetings. Now you can watch online as well, but I don't believe you can participate online anymore. So you have to show up, and there is physical distancing enforced in the council chambers. So I know we've talked about that as well. But it's definitely part of the youth movement, which the climate movement is increasingly a youth movement, and so we're relying on Mia to help in the months ahead, and connecting with a lot of her fellow students. She's a freshman at UWF now, and connecting with them to get them out to Fridays for Future. And then we'd really like to try to get some more high school students again, with Jet having graduated and moved on. I know I don't have a direct connection there, but hopefully we can find some more high school students who are able to engage on that. So that's a little about Fridays for Future. You can find more about that at the Facebook page, and the next event will be posted on there as well. And you can message Mia through the page as well if you have some specific questions for her. So with that, let's hear from Marley Wells, who is one of the, I guess, really the co-founder of the Sunrise Movement Pensacola, I think, along with Jet, if I'm describing that right, Marley, but you take it away.
It was with Jet and Mia, but you're right. So hi, everybody. If you don't know what Sunrise Movement is, I'm just going to give like a brief overview of what it is and then talk about what we do locally. So Sunrise Movement is a national youth-led movement. The goal is to stop climate change and create millions of good-paying jobs in the process, really focused on the Green New Deal and legislation like that, as well as ending the corrupting influence of fossil fuel executives that have power over a lot of the political system, and electing leaders who will stand up for the health and well-being of everybody. So in the recent election, I have some numbers. The Sunrise Movement worked really hard to contact youth voters and make sure that they turned out to vote. So this was done through like calls, texts, even postcards being sent out. So the numbers that I have here are in Pennsylvania, they contacted 416,000 youth voters over the last few months. In Michigan, it was 333,000 youth voters. North Carolina, 342,000. Wisconsin, 152,000. And Arizona, 130,000. And so those are not obviously the only states that they were doing, but those are like the key swing states that we saw in this election. So they did a lot of work, even for like, they were endorsing like very strong climate candidates down ballot. So that was really cool. And I have a quote here. According to a senior staffer from the Obama White House, young people, quote unquote, delivered this victory for Joe Biden. The goal that we have is just to like continue having that youth turnout, and turnout for everybody obviously is important, but to make sure that we're getting everybody involved in the struggle to make climate like a priority for everybody. So locally, the Sunrise Movement, we held one climate strike in December of last year, and then we were also supporting the Fridays for Future sit-ins at City Hall. However, we were formed pretty close, like we were not even a chapter yet when we had the climate strike, so the pandemic hit pretty much around the same time that we actually formed as a branch. I think it happened a couple weeks after that. It was like a nationwide panic. So we've kind of been in a lull for a few months, but we are really excited to be getting back with Fridays for Future and 350 and all the local groups to keep doing those sit-ins, and once a month. And then also I was going to drop a link. Christian told me that was fine. I'm going to drop a link in the chat. It is, it's called Sunrise School. Sunrise School runs this site that has lots of webinars and different programs to like help develop skills for young organizers. They have lots of different courses, but I'm going to drop that link. And then I'm also going to drop a link to a video about the plan to like introduce comprehensive climate legislation and some of the issues surrounding that with fossil fuel executives. I don't know if I described that correctly, but it's fine. So that is what I have. And I'm really, really excited to get back into the swing of things. It's just been crazy. Everybody can relate to that. So I'm just excited to get started again.
Well, Marley, you're such a great young leader. We're so glad to have you here in Pensacola. I mean, you do so much, and we're so glad to have you here. Do you expect to be hosting any truly local events coming up? Or I mean, I think you need some more help, right? Probably to organize, right? Need some more folks to join you.
I do need some more help. I would really appreciate some help because Jet is gone. I have Mia. She's also working with Fridays for Future though, and of course Christian and Sandra, but y'all are working like crazy. And Jay, I'm really happy to meet you today. I'm glad you're here. And Lindsay too, but you don't live here. So yeah, I would love to do some local stuff. I do need more help though. So I will get back to you on that. And you can find us at Sunrise Movement Pensacola on Facebook and reach out to me that way. And that would be great.
Great. Well, I hope you get some takers on that. You work so hard, and definitely good to get you some help so you all can do more. So thanks for the update on that, Marley. Really appreciate it. That brings us to Sandra Adams, Executive Director for 350 Pensacola.
Hi, so I guess I should start by saying, what is 350 Pensacola? What's the 350 part of our name? Most of you, or a lot of you on the call, probably already know this, but it stands for 350 parts per million, which is the level of carbon that we should have in the atmosphere to continue to have a sustainable planet. Unfortunately, we're about 410, 415 right now, so we're way above that. The scientists are the ones who've established science. Remember them, scientists and science, respected hopefully. They've established that this 350 parts per million is the appropriate target for us to get below. Clearly, it's going to take a lot to get us there. We are the local branch of the national organization called 350.org, which was started by Bill McKibben and some other folks, Naomi Klein and them. And right now we're one of the largest national and international organizations focused almost exclusively on climate change. Recently, of course, we've been very supportive of the Black Lives Matter organization and cause, and so we've really been partnering with them on a lot of stuff lately and trying to really focus on the whole issue of justice and climate justice, and really addressing the fact that climate change and the disasters that go along with it don't target everybody equally, unfortunately. You know, the most vulnerable populations all over the planet are the ones that stand to be affected by it the most, including in our own state and our own country. So that's an important partnership that we've got going on right now. But I thought locally, I thought I would read to y'all our mission statement that we came up with kind of in 2017, because that gives you an idea of what exactly we are all about. We are here to promote clean energy. We have three basic mission statement parts: promote clean energy, provide the public with current climate science and effectively communicate it, and to build an active and engaged membership. We also have some goals that we're working on, basically to encourage the city of Pensacola to adopt the recommendations of the Climate Change Task Force, which we were instrumental in setting up, and also to transition to 100% renewable energy by 2035, which is a much more ambitious goal than the one that the task force ended up adopting. I think they said 30% by 2030 was the goal that the task force eventually ended up recommending to the, or I don't know if it was what got recommended, if it's what they eventually accepted as one of their recommendations that they're going to look at and possibly implement, hopefully implement, although very little has been done on any of these recommendations since. Christian's put up the climate action recommendations on the screen here if you wanted to look at those. Basically, there was 80 recommendations made by the task force over, I guess it was about a 2-year period that they got together and studied and convened. And this task force included members from our group, our volunteer group, as well as some local professors, environmental scientists, things like that. So it was quite a in-depth and involved effort that was, I thought, produced a very interesting and sound document. Unfortunately, from the 80 recommendations, only 5 of them were adopted by the actual task force that went into and is presented to the city council that they're going to take up and address, presumably. And that's part of what our work is really involved with right now. It's probably our biggest focus, is pushing the Pensacola City Council to adopt the recommendations from the transition team or the task force team. And we really believe that the more we can do at the local level, the more effective we can be. Ultimately, our goal is obviously to get state and national movement on the whole climate issue. But we feel like we can have the most impact probably locally. And we feel that if enough of municipalities and local governments get together and start working on these things the higher levels of government, state and national, are going to be forced eventually to do something. And even if they don't, hopefully we will have produced enough change to make an impact at the local level. I also am going to drop a link into the chat for, it's for the 350 national organization, which goes by 350.org. And basically they're wanting people to sign a petition right now with 10 executive actions that they want President-elect Biden to do once he gets into office on his first day. And so they're really encouraging all of us, all of the local groups, to get our membership and other interested people to sign this petition so we can really show the incoming government that we're very serious, and this is a really important issue that many, many, many people really want them to address early on. I guess in terms of other things that we do, just briefly, we hold educational seminars. Probably lots of you have been on those or involved in those before. Come to some of our seminars, our evening seminars that we put on to educate the public about climate change issues. We also have, back in the good old days before COVID, we had a lot of booth events where we would go to festivals and different things and set up our booth and hand out educational materials and get people to sign petitions, for example, with some of the solar energy petitions that were going up before on the state ballots. We were quite involved in getting those passed. Or not passed, as the case may be. I can't remember if there was one we were actually going against. No, I'm trying to remember. I don't remember. But I guess it was the one that was sort of the hidden one from the utilities companies. But so we get involved in that. We're involved with trying to promote different legislation. We're involved in just trying to educate the public and just really get an understanding and acceptance that we have to start taking some pretty drastic actions to move to renewable energies. It's not going to be enough for us just to drive a little less or, recycle more or, produce a little bit less plastic. I mean, all those things are important, but basically we have to get our emissions under control. And that's our biggest focus, I would say.
Sandra, I'm going to go back one slide just so they see again your, your email address there, right? Whoops,
yes. Oh, yes. Sorry. That's what I meant to do too, was to say, to get hold of us, send me an email at 350pensacola@gmail.com, especially if you want to ask questions or start a dialogue, or to just sign up on our email list. We have an email list of about 700 people where we send out emails about once or twice a month, just letting people know what kind of actions we've got going on, like letting people know about this particular video conference, that kind of thing. So if you just want to get on that email list, you can send me an email. And we also have a Facebook page at 350 Pensacola on Facebook. So please come and check us out. And please get involved with this if you'd like to. Let us know if you want to be more involved. Help us out.
That's great. Sandra, thank you so much. And moving on, Jay Mcgee from Environment Florida.
Hey, one question before I start. Am I allowed to share my screen?
Yeah, you can do that.
All right, awesome, because I made like a small...
I have to stop mine and then, right?
All right, I made just a small little...
I may have to, I don't know if I have to grant you permission, Jay. Let's see.
If not, I'll just go off the top of my head.
Is it letting you do it?
Not yet, but if it doesn't, let's just go on as usual.
Here we go. Here we go. No, I got you. Try it now.
Right. Let me make sure that everything is good, and then yeah. So here. So just a short presentation. My name is Jay Mcgee, and I'm a student at the University of West Florida, and I'm a product intern and the 100% Renewable Campus Campaign lead at the University of West Florida. So just a little bit about Environment Florida. We are a subsidiary to Environment America, a 501c3 organization dedicated to protecting Florida's air, water, open spaces, investigating problems, crafting solutions, and educating the public and decision makers about environmental sustainability, good things for the environment. And just a small little quote from Environment Florida's website. Environment Florida's mission is to transform the power of all our imaginations and our ideas into change that makes the world a greener and healthier place for all. And so what is this campaign? And so this campaign basically has just three general goals. And the first goal is to commit to 100% renewable energy at the University of West Florida by 2050, with renewable electricity coming by 2035. And we also want to become the first state university to commit to 100%. And the question that I get a lot is, why universities? And when you look at universities, they're sort of like microcosms of cities. They're centralized residence halls, centralized eating locations, post office, classrooms. So they're centralized communities. Also, universities are one of the, if not the largest customer for utilities in many cities. Here, University of West Florida, while we may not be as large as a UF or UCF, we still got to keep the lights on for 12,000 students. So how are we going to do that in a time where Earth is getting hotter, sea levels are rising? You can see the effects here in Pensacola as water pH is going up, biodiversity is going down. How do we manage to keep the lights on and impact our environment in a good way as well? And so to achieve our goals, we go along the lines of just basic campaign actions. So student petitions right now, we're working on garnering student petitions. We're closing in on 100 signatures so far. We're shooting for 2,000 by the end of this campaign. UWF professor/faculty sign-ons. That's so that way we can communicate with our faculty, our professors, because they are one of, if not the most important part of any university, is their instructors, their professors. And professors are also a great way to garner knowledge for this campaign, as I know that a lot of professors can bring useful knowledge along the lines of renewable energy, climate change, things like that. The third is student organization sign-ons. So just the same with faculty and professor sign-ons. We want our student organizations to back us and be aware that we are in their best interest as well, because student organizations oftentimes they do a lot of work in terms of how they go along, how they do stuff on campus. And then connections with campus leaders, student leaders, and knowledgeable faculty. That's also a big thing, as sometimes the people on campus, they're not the ones that you first see. The decision makers on campus, they're not the ones that you see immediately. You may see a professor or faculty, but the person making decisions are behind the scenes in a closed office. So we really try to connect with those. Campus leaders also include SGA, UW board of directors, and then knowledgeable faculty kind of ties into the professor and faculty sign-ons, and then connections outside of UWF. That really is right here what I'm doing right now. All of the people moderating this chat, they are outside of UWF, and I had the opportunity to kind of explain my goals outside of the University of West Florida, because I do a lot of talk in the University of West Florida with students and faculty, but I don't really get the chance to talk outside of the university. So this is a great chance to do some of that, and we continue to look forward to talking to Pensacola leaders, people who maybe have helped to us. And then our team, Jenna Stevens, state director overseeing the whole thing. Got to give a great shout out to her. Myself, Ethan, I know Ethan is in the chat. What's up, Ethan? Ethan is going to begin starting with us as an intern, focusing on grassroots activities. Kaylin and Kate have also signed on. I don't think they're in the chat. But they are great leaders, really the future of not only this campaign, but the future of Pensacola, where UWF is headed. They are the future. And then our goals, obviously 100% renewable energy commitment by the University of West Florida by 2050. That's going to create change in Pensacola and the West Florida region. Our president, Martha Saunders, says she wanted us to be a leader in terms of education, because right now UWF is kind of just seen as that local university. You know, we're Pensacola's school, but we're not really on the same level as a University of Florida, UCF, FSU, and we're really working towards that. And I think Dr. Saunders has a great goal in mind of really putting the University of West Florida on a bigger platform. And so I think that this is one of the ways to do that, as a lot of people in their minds, you know, they are behind, you know, fighting climate change, obviously. And I think that if a university commits, that'll definitely be a great change for Pensacola. Many people will probably flock to this area as they know that UWF is definitely making a big change. Provide opportunities for our volunteers and interns. Obviously want to see, you know, people like Ethan, Caitlin, and Kate go on to do big things. I think this is really the start of that. Create an environmentally safe spot in Pensacola. I know that's kind of hard to create environmentally safe zones in northern Florida. Sometimes the vote really doesn't go our way, but I hope that with this campaign, we can create a spot where you can say, hey, the University of West Florida is doing their part. And I feel comfortable talking about climate change and how we can combat that in a university setting at the University of West Florida. And finally, to promote environmental education. That really does start with youth. It takes a lot of us, and I think that we could spread our goals of not only campaigning for the University of West Florida as an entity, but also educating the general public, people who may not even have affiliation with the UWF, make sure that they know what we do and that they are educated about the effects of climate change, so that way they can make smarter decisions in the future. And I think that's all that I have. I think that's all that I have.
So I'm thinking of how folks can get a hold of you, but I think that I think I had that on my. I can pull it back up again here, Jay, if I can find it.
Yeah.
The slide I had. There we go. Can you all see that? Okay.
Yep.
And that's got your email address there, right? So folks can get you that way.
Yeah. So I'm available through my email. I also dropped my public interest network email, the Environment Florida email.
Okay. Sorry.
So it's all right. I do either. But you know, if you want to talk about something, provide opportunities, reach out for opportunities. I'm always available to talk. My girlfriend Abby is in one of the participating members, and she knows that I love to talk a lot about science and climate change, and I can go on and on about it. So really, if you want to reach out, I'm here 24/7, 365, really.
Jay, it's so awesome to have you here. I'm a graduate of UWF for my master's degree, and I'm going to help you however I can as alumni. I know it helps a little bit, I think, you know, to have that voice from alumni anyway. And so you've got my support. It's an interesting dynamic out there at UWF because, you know, you come out to the university, and what's the big thing that's looming over the campus is a big smokestack from the Crisp plant, which for years was one of the dirtiest coal-fired power plants around. And I think it may be fully transitioned now to natural gas. They've been transitioning it in recent years slowly. I think it may be fully there now, but it's a very strange dynamic with this big smokestack that's literally like just kind of hanging over the campus. But anyway, your work is awesome. I'm really excited to have you there, and we're going to continue to collaborate in the months ahead. I know. So, thanks for sharing all that. I'll just wrap up before we take questions for everybody, but just a little bit about the work that I do with Healthy Golf. We've been around since 1995. We're really the only nonprofit dedicated to the Gulf of Mexico and working in all 5 Gulf states. We are a 501c3. So we do what I call science-based advocacy. So, I mean, I look at the science and then advocate around that. And we find whatever issues there are in communities, especially issues that have a connection or a nexus to waterways, whether that's the Gulf of Mexico or the bays and the bayous and the creeks and everything that flows down to the Gulf. Because if none of those are healthy, then the Gulf of Mexico is not going to be healthy. So we look for those connections to our waterways and the health of our waterways. And increasingly in our work, we're looking for connections with people and communities, and really, and you know, pulling our work in around people who have been left out of things in the past, people who may suffer disproportionately from things like whether it's flooding or the pollution from some of the industrial facilities and such, which is especially a problem to our west in places like Louisiana, where a lot of my colleagues work. And then, of course, offshore in the Gulf of Mexico, a lot of our work has been around that. The Gulf of Mexico is really the sacrifice zone for the United States for our policy of cheap but very dirty energy. It sacrifices people, it sacrifices the planet. We all saw that, firsthand in the 2010 BP disaster, which was not even a rig that was off Florida shores, and yet we saw what it did to us here. So we've got to transition. That transition's inevitable, and a lot of our work for years has involved around fighting the expansion of oil and gas in the Gulf of Mexico, and that fight continues. I think we've, President-elect Biden has made some promises around that. I believe he talked about, and anybody can correct me if you want, but I know he talked about no more, I think no expansion of fracking on federal lands or public lands, I believe, but I'm not sure to what degree he talked about any more expansion of oil and gas drilling. For example, I think it's November 18 is the next lease sale in the Gulf of Mexico. So, these are lands, submerged lands underwater. They're owned together by all of us, right? And the government holds those in our trust, and they occasionally lease some of those for more oil and gas drilling. And so that process continues on, and that's coming up in a couple of weeks. But we'll have to see as his policies get hashed out how that is. But we will be, I know Healthy Gulf will be involved in opposing that lease sale. I can tell you that the dirty energy industry is getting even riskier in the sense that the rigs now, when you look at a map of the Gulf of Mexico, the rigs are farther and farther away. They're farther and farther offshore and in deeper water because the easy stuff has already been gotten, right? The stuff close to shore has been tapped. So I know the BP disaster, that rig was in like 5,000 feet of water. They're out there now and close to 10,000 feet of water, a couple of the rigs out there. So really pushing the limits. And yet, we have, of course, here in Florida, we're the Sunshine State, and we have access to renewables, and we just need to accelerate that transition. So we are signed on to Gulf South for a Green New Deal. We had an event called the Gulf Gathering this fall that Healthy Gulf was participated in pretty heavily, building those coalitions among the 5 Gulf states, and especially among people, like I said, who've been disproportionately impacted by all the polluting fossil fuels and the industries and the petrochemical facilities on land that process all of that. So really trying to bring people together around full access to clean energy jobs as that transition takes place here in the future. And that's something that the Gulf South for a Green New Deal is really pushing hard. So, well, we've been involved in a lot of events through the years, whether it's going to Tallahassee on the public hearings there on drilling. Some of my colleagues actually fly out. We have volunteer pilots that fly us out from a group called South Wings out over the rigs in the Gulf of Mexico to provide that third-party oversight, to watch over them, find sources of pollution and report those and identify those. And then here at the local level, working with people like you see there, he was county commissioner then, Grover Robinson, now mayor of Pensacola, who's always been a friend on the drilling issue here locally. And so, it's the elected officials in this area, the drilling issue's always been a very easy one. They're all against drilling. A little stickier when we're getting them to make the renewable energy commitments that we need them to make. So I'm going to continue to be pushing the mayor in the months ahead, hopefully working with all of you along, and the city council. You see the current existing city council pictured here. The 4 members to the right, at least 3 of those will be going away here in the next couple of weeks. So it's going to be a huge transition, at least 3 new members, if not 4 new members of the city council. And I think we generally have a pretty friendly council to climate action and hopefully renewable energy, but we'll be spending the months ahead educating those new council members about, because the new ones are not maybe going to know much about the climate task force report and what it recommended. So bringing them up to speed on those recommendations, and then now getting them to take more formal action, because the council, the way that our charter is and the balance of powers, everybody thinks the mayor has all the power, but the council and the mayor has a lot of power, but the council has the power of the purse. So they allocate money just like the Congress does. And they need to be more forceful in exerting that and not just taking what the mayor presents to them in the budget. And so I think they are getting better at that, at digging into that budget. And clearly, if we're going to meet our interim goal of 30% renewable energy by 2030 and then 100% by 2040 for city operations, then the budget's going to need to start reflecting that, and we're going to need to start spending some money on renewables and on energy conservation. So we'll be working on that. I know I'm working with some of the local solar companies here to try to get the city to put out some RFPs on putting solar panels on some of their community centers, which typically are very large, south-facing roofs with no shade on them. Perfect place to put solar panels. So we'll be working on that, among other things, in the months ahead. So we do have a website, healthygolf.org. You can also reach me there, Christian@healthygolf.org. And so please do contact me. We'd love to have you get involved in our issues. So a lot of other things too we're doing related to water quality, toxic algae, the nutrient issues, a lot of other things. And we'll certainly be there in Tallahassee in March with Lindsay and others as the legislative session gets going, and try to push them forward on some positive changes. So with that, we're going to take some questions. I don't know, Marley, Jay, are you watching the chat? Or I know I saw one, let's see. I got to navigate back to it again here.
I was watching. There
was one about
there's one.
there was one question about so there was an attempt to get true energy choice here in Florida, which would be a deregulated electricity market, which is what they have in Texas, and I believe maybe Michigan. There's just a few states that have done that, where you would actually be able to choose your provider of electricity. But that was struck down. I believe they knocked it down at the either didn't get enough signatures, or it was knocked out by the state Supreme Court, which tends to be not very friendly to these things. So I don't know if Lindsay or anybody else knows about that issue, or the chances that might be resurrected.
Yeah, Christian, I don't know specifics on that to comment. It's a great question. A lot of my focus with Florida Conservation Voters is more on the public lands and the water side. And of course, that all has a tie-in to our climate, but I don't have specifics on that question.
It's definitely, that's a lot of heavy lifting. As we indicated before, the power of the utility industry in Tallahassee, it's very, very strong. They give as much or more money to elected officials, legally for their campaigns as anybody. And they have a great deal of power. So anyway, not sure about that one. Maybe better chance to get some more incentives for renewables. But I do want to mention Enid Siskin is on with us tonight, and it's great to see Enid. Enid was really the first person to really push the local effort to keep drilling away from our shores back in the 90s, when there was a proposal to drill off of Northwest Florida, off of Pensacola, that got pretty far along. And Enid's reminding me that it wasn't always that easy to get the elected officials on board opposing drilling. And so that's a good reminder, Enid. Thank you for that. It's definitely easier now after BP. Even the ones that weren't with us, like Rick Scott, have had to get on board with it, just because Floridians are overwhelmingly against it. And at some point, even if you're not against it, if you're an elected official, you kind of have to get on board. But that's a good reminder, Edith. So thank you. Any other specific questions for our panelists? We can type them in the chat. I want to ask, maybe, I don't know, Lindsay, anything else that we didn't cover on the state legislature, especially related to energy and climate, that might be coming up in March? And you all start probably like in January with committee meetings and such.
Yeah.
Right?
So the way the schedule is going to go is the legislature, before the full session, they have usually about 5 weeks of committees. This year, it's going to start on January 11th, and there'll be committee weeks in January and February. So we'll be looking at how that's structured, as well as what it means for groups, how we're going to be able to get the public engaged with their elected officials. A lot of those things are still being decided both on the House and the Senate level, in coordination with groups like Tampa General Hospital, to make sure that we're protecting people from COVID, but also being able to have productive discussions about our state budget and the needs of Floridians. So committee weeks this year are the week of January 11th, January 25th, February 1st, 8th, and then 15th. And then the full session will begin on Tuesday, March 2nd. So begin a 60-day session. So a lot of things that will still be in the works. We'll be looking at which of our incumbents and newly elected officials, what is a good fit for them and their constituents. We know that climate change and impacts to our community members across the board, it's the biggest issue we're facing in Florida and as a nation. But there's also local elected officials that may have some more personal connections to it in their communities. So we'll be looking at the type of priorities that we have with Florida conservation voters, which includes not only climate, but clean water, public lands, and democracy, and looking at which of our senators and representatives are going to be the best champions for those issues.
Excellent. Well, we'll be relying on you for some advice on kind of how to navigate things in Tallahassee. So thank you.
Well, we all help each other, which is the great part.
Indeed. I want to ask our youth representatives here, our youth movement in Marley and Jay. I'm looking toward, just maybe you all can both speak to what some of your friends are talking about now after the election. How do they feel about climate issues? Are they more engaged, less engaged, hopeful? How are they feeling? Obviously, it's really been in recent years just increasingly a youth movement, which we're all so excited to see, because you all have so much at stake. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So I just turned 21 back in January. So I feel like kind of a young guy, but just based amongst my peers, there is ambition, and that really did start when President-elect Joe Biden was confirmed that he was president-elect. I saw the topic sort of shift to, like what I said earlier, finally believing in science. That was a huge thing that has kind of lingered over the past 4 years, is, more just based on immediate decisions versus focusing on what the science tells you. So that's something that a lot of people have been talking about. I personally think like sometimes people can be a little grim. I know that I think Senator Alexandria Cortez, she gave us a 12-year time frame to get everything under control, or the world is going to end. And I think that resonates a lot amongst the youth movement, is the time is short. And by the time that, scientists say, the bad things are going to happen, I'm going to be a middle-aged man. So it is very concerning for a lot of people that, by the time, 2050, 2060 rolls around, I'll still be around to see the effects of climate change. So I think people are looking at it as a good thing, that, at least for the next 4 years, 8 years, we'll be headed in a right path. But at the same time, people do look at that path as something that we have almost made irreversible and can only be solved up to a point, because not everything can heal itself. We have done a lot of bad things in terms of deforestation, coral reefs really kind of being wiped off the face of the earth. Those are things that people kind of look at and say, like, yeah, I won't ever see another coral reef in my life, just based on the way things are going. So I think there is optimism, but then there also is sort of like a thing that brings us back down to reality of there is still a lot of work that needs to be done, because the future is still grim in a lot of places and for a lot of people.
Marley, what would you like to add?
Yeah, you covered a lot of it, Jay. I do want to echo the sentiment that a lot of my friends are cautiously optimistic. I will say there is a lot of talk of just, no matter who wins the election, this was weeks ago, to still be in the streets. Like, we're still going to have to be pushing whoever wins to get whatever we want done. Like, we can't relax just because Joe Biden wins. So that's kind of how I'm feeling. Like, we still are going to have to work really hard, but I am glad that the person that we're going to be pushing is somebody that isn't a climate change denier and has said that he will put people in the positions that we need, who actually believe in the science and will look to people who know what they're talking about. So I'm happy about that, but I'm still at a point where I'm like, I'm going to be pushing no matter what. But that's where I'm at. And Jay, you really covered a lot of that, so I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. And one more thing, just being at the university level, kind of see what goes on at the university. I think a lot of university students and faculty are very optimistic, like I said, just in terms of funding and grants and research. I know that it was kind of a bummer over the Trump administration in the past 4 years, watching things like the EPA and stuff like that kind of get their funding rolled back. And the EPA is a place where a lot of people want to graduate and go work for the EPA, do research with the EPA, because it is really the biggest environmental agency in the United States. And to see their money get taken away was kind of a bummer. But I think there is a lot of optimism in the university setting, at least, that for the next few years, it'll be easier to get money for research, and the opportunities for research will grow. And I think that's a point that I should make, is that there are a lot of smart people out there, a lot of helpful professors and faculty that are making huge changes. They can't get their work out just based on funding. So hopefully over the next 4 to 8 years, we can watch some of these smart people out at University of West Florida and all the universities kind of get the funding that they deserve and that they require for their work to be done and for their work to impact the people.
That's awesome, Jay. Yeah, thanks for that too. So maybe shifting to the other end of things, Sandra Adams has been at this a little longer, going back to the apartheid issues and some other issues back in the 80s. So maybe just as we get toward wrapping up here, Sandra, any perspective you want to offer on the movement and the path ahead?
I'm just very encouraged by the fact that it may seem like a long time for the younger people, but for me, 10 years doesn't seem like a long time in my 60s now. But just over the past 10 years, just seeing the conversation move from one that just seemed out on the fringes. People just thought, I think us climate oriented folks were kind of this sort of fringe left wing, some group or something that, we were all a bunch of extremists or whatever. And just seeing how that's finally the media is starting to pick up, the local public is starting to understand that this really is something we have to do something about. And I'm encouraged by that. I'm just praying and hoping it's not too little too late. I do want to add the perspective for the young folks that haven't been around and being an activist in various causes for a while, is sometimes you can get very discouraged, get really depressed by the lack of movement that you seem to be seeing in the issues you're interested in. But it's amazing how all of a sudden there can sort of come a tipping point, like with the apartheid thing, and that is a good example. Or I was very involved in protesting against nuclear weapons too back in the 80s, and how those things that I was convinced, would never have a positive resolution, or that we would all be dead of a nuclear holocaust, have not come to pass, at least not yet, and are looking less likely to do so than they did back in the 80s. And I just want to say that you can reach a tipping point where things really do start to happen pretty quickly, and I still am pretty optimistic about humans in general being able to solve a lot of problems and work our ways out of crises. I'm hoping we can still do it at a massive level, the massive level we have to with this problem. That's just to hang in there, fight the good fight. One of the things I'm really interested in lately is how to talk to people who aren't very interested in this topic, how to get them more engaged and interested, how to talk to them. And I think just using personal anecdotes is helpful, asking them, what they think about it, or, are they concerned about it at all, just sort of engaging in the conversation. And just in a very calm, kind of non-threatening way, I think is pretty useful, because there is more and more information out there, and people can you'll find more and more things that support, our point of view on things that we can point people to or whatever, so that's useful. One of the latest things I was really happy to see and excited by was Time's recent. They had a full issue a couple months ago, I guess, that was just all about the climate crisis, and it was just a beautifully written magazine. In terms of all the articles in it were excellent. Greta Thunberg's, interestingly, her essay was probably the most depressing of them all. Basically, she doesn't have much hope for the future. So, but it was I just think there's the fact that Time would take an entire publication, one of their entire issues, and make it all about that and things like that is encouraging to me, that it is becoming more mainstream. So whatever you can do to sort of keep the conversation going and get it as a mainstream one, I think is useful.
Well, thank you, Sandra. That's great perspective. I know one thing that works really well that I've brought more and more into my work, and I need to do even more of it, and that's storytelling, that makes things personal for people. Because then it just seems like, in the case of climate change, whoever's being affected or whatever the issue is, it just seems like somebody that they might know in their community. It just makes it, very personal like that, and that works really well. So it's a good thing to bring into our work. So, whoops, little, oh well, trying to mess up my slides. Sorry, you all. I was just going to leave us. We are this this little oasis of life. There we go. Floating out in this void of space, and there is no planet B. This is the only one we've got, and it's got everything that we need, right? And climate change really is the epic challenge of our time. And I want to believe that the glass is half full, and continue to have optimism and work on that. And I'm certainly, my own attitudes about this are certainly improved by having all of you on this call and talking to all of you and hearing more about the work that you're all doing. Certainly inspires me and makes me want to work even harder. We do have an opportunity now with the changes taking place in the electorates. We've got to seize that, and I hope that all of us will continue to work together in the months and years ahead. And all those who joined us on the call, thank you all so much. And please get involved with one or more of these groups. Here in Pensacola, anyway, we've got two very obvious targets now, which is really great to know where your targets are. One is the city of Pensacola, the Pensacola City Council, and the mayor of Pensacola, and then out with Jay at the University of West Florida. And so those are doable. We can do this. These are targets that we can, if we do things right and we follow our strategy correctly and get the people involved, I think we can prevail and do what we need to do there. So thanks all of you, get involved. Thanks again to our panelists for joining us, and Lindsay especially joining us from St. Pete and adding all your insights on the state issues. Thanks again. And everybody, please be safe and be well, and let's all stay in touch and pledge to keep working together and make this happen. So thanks everybody, and good night.
Thank you, Christian.
Good night, y'all.
Good night, everybody.
Night.
Thank you all.